Hello everybody. Today we are ranking the Ace Attorney chapters. If you're new here, I'm Press. I'm a coffee barista VTuber. We stream Ace Attorney probably once or twice a week, and we recently just wrapped up the original Phoenix Wright trilogy. And as we move on to investigations, I thought what better way to celebrate than to have a little goof around, rank all the different cases that we did. And so I've got my own tier list here. Now, these are not your typical S, A, B, C tiers. No, because we are ranking them based on a different criteria. And those criteria are, first, Shakespeare could never. These are the cream of the crop cases. The best of the best reserved for only a select few. Then we have the New York Times bestseller, critically acclaimed. Can win some awards. Another highly prestigious category. After that, we have integral to the lore. Either the case itself was slower, or maybe it introduced a character that becomes integral later on, or a plot point that I thought was a really cool bit of foreshadowing. Our fourth tier, we have a very hungry caterpillar. Much like the children's book, this tier is reserved for your baby cases. However, not every tutorial case, I will say, is going under very hungry caterpillar. I think there are some really good ones. And last but not least, in our bottom tier, we have everyone involved should go to jail. This one's reserved for a very special case. Starting with case number 1, the first turnabout. No surprise, this one's going to very hungry caterpillar. It is like the Ace Attorney tutorial. I feel like the other ones at least give you some challenges. This one's pretty straightforward. While I have struggled on some of the tutorial cases in the other games, I like to think I kept my wits about me on this one. This one's obviously, again, pretty quick. We meet Larry. Unfortunately, we also meet Payne. Oh, I gotta move my mouse out of the way or chat's gonna roast me. I think this case does a good job at setting the scene for what Ace Attorney is, which is a semi-serious game that focuses on very serious topics, but does so in a way that is very goofy with very goofy characters. I wasn't 100% sure what to expect going into the Ace Attorney series. It had been forever since I touched it as a child. I was very surprised to learn that our client's name was Larry Butts and the witness's name was Frank Saw It. And I'm like, haha, funny names. Oh shoot, a murder just happened. Now, our second case skips integral to the lore. I am putting Turnabout Sisters as a New York Times bestseller. It's probably a little early to put one of the first cases in such a high tier. However, I do want to give them credit because they introduce a character who no doubt would have been a fan favorite. I mean, she's still a fan favorite in Mia. And then to kill her off about an hour into the game, I thought was a risky choice, but one that paid off because that would be the catapult that sets the rest of the series in motion. And I want to give credit where credit is due. I think taking risks and killing off important characters is something that can bite a writer in the butt a lot of the times, but when it's done correctly, it works really well, and I will always respect someone who can pull it off very well. Now, in Ace Attorney's case, you know, we get the benefit of, yes, she's dead, but we channel her quite often, so you do still get to see Mia, but still at the time, we don't necessarily know that. I also like that this case kind of sets the scene that the judicial system in Ace Attorney is not just a completely clean branch of government. It is not all sunshine and rainbows, particularly the fact that Red White, who is the actual killer in this case, has blackmail on just about everybody, including the judge. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily the most in-depth case. They show us who the killer is at the start of the episode, so we know what's going down. It kind of takes away the mystery aspect of it. In another Ace Attorney video I did, I actually touch on why that ends up being a good decision to show us the killer in this instance so that they can subvert our expectations later. If you're interested in that, check out the other video when you're done with this one. But yeah, overall, I thought the writing was good. I thought it was cool. I thought it did its job in getting the player hooked. For me, I was interested after the tutorial case. This is the one that sold me that, oh, I think I'm really gonna enjoy this game. Case number 3, Turnabout Samurai. Another good one. If I remember right, I think that this ends up being the first 3-day case, right? The first case that takes the entire 3 days. if I remember correctly. Now that I'm looking at this, I feel like all of these could be integral to the lore. So I'm going to put this in New York Times bestseller. However, I do not want you to think that that means I don't think that either of these cases are integral to the lore. Obviously, especially Turnabout Sisters is integral to the lore. But the writing in these two I just think is really cool. I like that Gumshoe gets a moment to shine in Turnabout Samurai. I also really like Will Powers. I was very happy when he appeared in a later case. Can't say the same about Wendy Oldbag, but you can't win them all. And for our next one, we are looking at Turnabout Goodbyes, which I am giving our very first award of Shakespeare Could Never. If the tutorial gave me an idea of what the game is like, and these two cemented my interest, this is the case that really got me hooked on Ace Attorney. This one has everything. It has background for Miles Edgeworth and Phoenix. It has a phenomenal antagonist in Manfred von Karma, with relations to the main antagonist that will remain in the series in Miles Edgeworth. It has very serious moments. It has multiple cases looped into one really long chapter. It's another trial that goes 3 days. And again, it just kind of shows how corrupt the judicial system can be. Manfred von Karma is known as this perfect prosecutor who will use any tool at his disposal to get a guilty verdict, no matter how sketchy or illegal it might be. And the court just kind of lets him operate like that because he's the guy. The same way that no one really wanted to tackle the case with Red White because he had blackmail on everybody. And so it hits these very serious themes, and then you put a parrot on the stand and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but I like what's happening here. I really like this case. Now, this next one is one of the ones that I am most torn on, and that is Rise from the Ashes. And I'm torn between putting it between Shakespeare Could Never and New York Times bestseller. On one hand, I love all of the fun additions that they added to the investigation portion. Since this wasn't in the original games, there is a lot more that they could do with the investigations, with it being on the DS rather than being on the Game Boy Advance. And I like that they took advantage of that. It had some really fun, albeit difficult puzzles to solve. I loved Emma. I thought she was such a great addition to the roster. I really hope that she comes back in some capacity in the future games. Please don't spoil me if she does. I'm trying to avoid all spoilers I can. Like other cases, this one continued the theme of touching on the corruption within these different organizations, this time from the police perspective. And it continues to amaze me how they mix serious with goofy in these crazy scenarios. It was very long, although at no point did I think that it was too long. At no point did it feel like a slog. It's just objectively one of the longer cases. The only knock I would give it is that I didn't think Gant was the most interesting character. And sometimes you don't necessarily need every single antagonist to be this mega boss with this crazy motive. I will give them credit that Gant, who's really just the head of the police department, just wanted more power, and that's why he blackmailed Lana and committed the crime. So not as flashy as a motive as some of the other cases, but again, that's really the only negative, and I don't even know if it is a negative. It's just the route that they wanted the story to take. I'm still gonna put this one in Shakespeare Could Never, but I do think I favored Turnabout Goodbyes a little bit more. I don't know if we're doing these based on the order that I liked them. I say I don't know, like I'm not the one making the tier list. If that's the case, I'm actually gonna put Samurai ahead of Turnabout Sisters. Moving on to the second game, we've got The Lost Turnabout, and much like the last tutorial, this one is going in as a very hungry caterpillar. We meet Maggie, that's cool. I really like Maggie Bird as a character, but there's really nothing crazy that goes on here. It's just another tutorial case. But the next one, Reunion and Turnabout, I'm gonna put as a New York Times bestseller. Had you asked me this before I played the third game, I might have just put this into integral to the lore. However, this case is so dang important to the rest of the story in hindsight, and they dropped so many nice little foreshadowing clues that I think this case is really good on a rewatch. Obviously, you meet Pearl, you meet Franziska von Karma, but where I felt like the first game was centered around making a story out of that one particular game, I do feel like since the second game got greenlit, this right here is where the big story picks up. This is where the overarching plot starts, even if these ones above it did really, really good at hammering in points on individual characters, particularly Miles Edgeworth. But when we sentence Aunt Morgan and she swears that she will make Pearl the leader of the Karain channeling technique, I'm not gonna lie, I thought she was bluffing. No, she still had plans up her sleeve. So I think that this one's really cool when you have all the information in hindsight. Turnabout Big Top. I don't think it's a surprise where this one's going. I think everyone involved should go to jail. Ben and Trillo, jail. Maximilian Galactica, behind bars. The judge? I mean, he should have been in jail probably a long time ago. There's some real shady stuff going down, but he's also going to jail in this one. This case was weird. It was fine. This case, even by Ace Attorney standards, I felt like this case was a little bit far-fetched. The fact that the head bust just caught Max's jacket and lifted it up into the sky, I was like, okay, even for Ace Attorney, this one seems a little bit extreme. Probably my least favorite case in the entire games. I don't think the writing's bad. There are still some characters. Like, I think Regina's really fun. And I will say, I had a lot of fun playing it with people on stream. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I was just playing through it by myself. But having people there, of course, always makes it more fun. But that's okay, because after this case, we get into a flow of some giga bangers. Farewell, my turnabout. Shakespeare could never. Shakespeare could never. Oh, I think this case is so good. I had asked myself this question probably for the 8 months that it was working up to playing this case from playing the other games. Will we ever have to defend a client that is actually guilty, or will our client always be innocent? And this case not only subverted my expectations, but it was a complete surprise, because Matt on guard seems like this goofy, carefree guy, and it's all an act. And that last day in court where we know that Matt is guilty and we are still pushing through, it's like low-key brutal. He's got our friend hostage, and it is our duty to represent him. But it clearly clashes with Phoenix's morals, and it's a really, really difficult question that I think real attorneys have to answer in everyday life. And I'm so glad that they took the opportunity with this case to actually tackle that dilemma in the game. I think it would have been really easy to not deal with that. It would have been really easy to make all of Phoenix's clients innocent, but that, I think, is part of what makes Ace Attorney so great. It does such a phenomenal job at subverting viewer expectations. Another one that Shakespeare has taken notes from, Turnabout Memories. Oh, am I supposed to be ranking these up here? Hang on. I forgot I was supposed... If these are in order, then Von Karma's case probably is at the top, then Matt on guards. Yeah, now we're starting to look like a tier list. Anyway, Turnabout Memories. I know in the last case of Justice for All, they let us play as someone else. We got to play as Maya for a little bit as she was kidnapped. But this is the first time we got to take complete control of someone else in the courtroom. And I just thought it was fun. I just thought it was neat. It was nice to see Mia in her early days as an attorney. It was fun to see a little baby Phoenix in his college days. To be honest, for a tutorial case, this one was really long. I think it took me like 3 hours. And that's obviously because this was setting up for the larger story to close out the game. I didn't know it at the time. If you had asked me right when I had finished playing, I would probably have said it's like a New York Times bestseller. I really liked the story, but as a standalone, I mean, it was only 3 hours. But oh my gosh, the setup that it did for the latter half of the game that I never saw coming. And I have a complete new respect for this one, which I already had really liked. To be honest, the next two, Stolen Turnabout and Recipe for Turnabout, it's not that I didn't enjoy them. They are both going into integral to the lore. I actually think story-wise, both of them are on par with Turnabout Sisters and Turnabout Samurai. But they didn't do a lot outside of introducing Godot to the overarching plot. Again, you do have to have a couple of cases to get to know Godot. That way the final payoff in the last case hits so much harder because we've been doing case after case with this guy. And obviously not every single case in the layout of Ace Attorney's story structure can commit to the large overarching plot in a huge way. But I do think they do a couple of things really well. In Recipe for Turnabout, awesome foreshadowing with the fact that Godot cannot notice the ketchup on the apron. Or was it blood? I don't remember at this point. I just remember that Godot couldn't see it. I would say that that's a pretty important piece of information that, hear me out, is integral to the lore. It's almost like I named the category that for a reason. These two stories really, I think, were just there to build up the mystery of Godot, and they did exactly that. The latter half of the game banged because these two cases existed. Even if these two weren't making you jump out of your chair. And don't get me wrong, they were still really fun. I thought Luke at me being mask to mask and putting himself on trial for a crime on purpose so that he could have an alibi for a bigger crime was really cool. The writing in these is really strong. Like I say, I do think the writing is on par for these top two. I just didn't think they drove the story enough outside of Godot's development for them to be a New York Times bestseller. Still really enjoyed them though. I don't know how anyone thought Furio Tigre was Phoenix Wright, but that's a conversation for another day. You can't take Ace Attorney too seriously. But again, these two cases walked so that these two cases could run. Turnabout Beginnings. One of my faves. We meet Dahlia Hawthorne for a second time. And once again, I'm fooled because I think this has got to be the last time we meet Dahlia Hawthorne. Little did I know. Again, we get to play as Mia. I love playing as Mia. The minute that it registered in me that Terry had drank the poison, I believe I actually stood up out of my chair. It was crazy. And again, that moment was so cool because of the setup with the poison vial from the tutorial case in game 3. Again, you learn more about Dahlia. You finally understand why Mia hates her so much. You wrap up the case. You're snowballed into the next one where you meet Iris, who looks suspiciously like Dahlia Hawthorne. That brings us to the last case of the Phoenix Wright trilogy, Bridge to the Turnabout. And while I have some notes, some talking points about each of these cases here on my second monitor, for this one, I only have one note, and it just says, greatest case ever. This one was a banger. It really had everything. First, you got to play as Miles Edgeworth, which I thought was pretty fun. The mystery of Iris and Dahlia Hawthorne, I also thought was very fun. Probably the coolest thing is that we finally get an answer to what was brought up in the very second case of the game, which is Misty Faye's disappearance. Unfortunately, she didn't get a lot of screen time, but that doesn't mean that her presence wasn't super impactful. This really tied up all of the loose ends that I can think of from the original trilogy. Phoenix and Iris reconciled. You get closure on Mia. You get answers about Misty. It is great character development for Maya and for Pearl. And heck, you know what? Even Larry got some character development. Apologies, I mean Larice. I kept calling this one the Ace Attorney All-Star game. This had everybody. It had Phoenix, it had Larry, it had Gumshoe, Edgeworth, Von Karma, Godot, Maya, Pearl, Morgan, Dahlia Hawthorne, and they all played an integral part. This case was awesome, and it was the kind of awesome that I think you could only get in Ace Attorney, because Ace Attorney is probably the only game that will put you in a serious courtroom setting and say, by the way, we can also channel the dead, and no one really questions it, but it's been set up for the past 3 games, and so it makes sense in the story structure. This case is my all-time favorite Ace Attorney case. So good, in fact, that at some point I will probably make a video dissecting it a little bit more. For now, though, this is all I've got for you. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. I try to release my live stream schedule every Sunday before the week. Thinking about switching that to Saturday, but for now it'll be Sunday. Whether it's for Ace Attorney or any of the other random games that we play, if you ever want to come hang out, I do think that we have a pretty good time. Other than that, whether you are just waking up in the morning, stopping by on your lunch break, or settling in after dinner, thanks for hanging out and having a cup of coffee and goofing around with a little tier list, and I'll see you in the next live stream or video. See ya!